Hey, welcome back to the Gilbertson Aero Factory. Today is Tuesday, the 20th of June, 2023. This is going to be a different kind of video than anything that I've done, at least in a long time. A few days ago, I got a comment from a viewer named Broken Biker, who said that he's just about to start his RV-8 build, and he was wondering if I could do a video covering the tools that I use. This is a great idea. In the last 6 months, I've learned a ton about what I need and what I don't, and things that I wish that I'd had at the beginning that I ended up getting later. So this is going to be a longer video than really anything that I have done on this channel to this point. But I will put chapters down below, so if there is something specific that you're looking for, you should be able to navigate to it pretty quickly. I'm going to talk about all the tools that I started with and then the tools that I've accumulated along the way, including the tools that I've had to build. And then I'm also just going to give an updated shop tour because it's been a while since I've done one, and if you followed this channel for any length of time, you know that the configuration the shop has changed several times as I moved into different phases of the build. And then lastly, any tools that I talk about or accessories or whatever, I'll try to put a link in the description below so that you can find those easily if you're looking for them for yourself. So let's not take up any more time in this intro, get straight into the shop tour, and let's build an airplane. Well, welcome to the How the Sausage is Made tour. Maybe at some point you've seen this perspective, but this is just for scale, I suppose. This is a 2-car garage and then a fake 1-car garage. I don't see how you can park a car in there without ripping the mirrors off. But anyways, I just wanted to give you a little bit of scale as to the space that I'm working in for building my airplane. Everybody's situation is going to be a little bit different. I myself am a first-time homeowner, and about a year and a half ago I came to Texas to hang out with a buddy and do some instrument flight training, and found out that I could buy a house for less than my 700 square foot apartment in Southern California. And I jokingly told the realtor that I needed a 3-car garage because I was going to build an airplane, and she found me a car with a 3-car garage, so I started building an airplane. So let's start right here. In the beginning, this was a vast expanse of nothing, and one of the first things I did was I built these workbenches. These are straight out of the plans from the EAA chapter 1000 something or other. Very few modifications from the plans other than adding these locking casters right here, and also shortening the length of these legs. So I think that I should have measured it. I'll put a graphic up here to say the measurement. All this to say that I shortened the legs by the height of those casters so that they matched. On that point, I'm not a tall guy. I'm 5'10", and I'm kind of wishing that I had left these benches at their original height and added the casters to them. I always feel like these are just a little bit lower than I would want them to be. Even though there are times when you need to get up higher for work, and then it might seem convenient, but those times are few and far between. Most of the time I'm down here wishing that it was another 3 or 4 inches taller. So just like myself, to be honest. So yeah, I built 2 of the EAA benches. The other modification I made, and we'll get more into this when we talk about the tools, is just these little 2x4 braces. These serve as a table to mount the DRDT2 dimpling device. That's all we're going to say about that, because we're going to get to it later on. In addition, just sticking with the theme of what we did first, the leftover lumber from the benches that I made over there, I created this this station for my benchtop tools. And I put a lot of thought into how this went together. Also on casters, but these are different. These are leveling casters, and I'll find a different angle here where maybe you can get a better view. These are leveling casters. So this bench is pretty easy to move around once those casters have been kind of rested back on the ground. But it does take probably 10 or 15 minutes once this is in place to get the table situated and level. But does it matter if it's level? I don't know. I kind of like it. Let's talk about the tools on the bench. Before I started building the airplane, the extent of my tool collection was limited to what I could fit in this pack out. And it was basically the usual kind of stuff, you know, a socket set, some screwdrivers, and then relative to my job, you know, some gunsmithing tools, and, you know, DeWalt set with an impact driver and a drill. So everything else had to start from scratch. So what do we have on the bench here? We've got a 6-inch buffer with a Scotch-Brite wheel on it, and this thing that polishing that never really gets used. I've got a combo disc sander and belt sander. I've got a pretty sturdy vise here, and I'm very happy that I opted to go with a sturdy, heavier vise. Not super expensive, but also not super cheap, but I'm really happy with that choice instead of going with the super lightweight one. And then on the vise, these nylon jaws, and you can see one side is kind of textured and the other side is flat, so you can hold material that you want to keep flat, or you can flip it and you can use it to hold like round pieces of tube or whatnot. More on these later. I've got a small bandsaw, 9-inch bandsaw. We'll talk about the blade for the bandsaw a little bit later. I've got a hand-me-down drill press. This saved me some money. I'm super happy to have it. I will say about the drill press, I'm really happy to have this one. If I was going to, knowing what I know now, if I was going to do this again, I would probably get a much larger freestanding drill press, because there are times when I just run out of room between a drill press vise, and I think that this is really handy and important to have, and the bit and everything. I run out of room for material on some of the thicker pieces, because lots of times you're not working with just a single sheet of material, but you're working over a flange or stacks of material. So I've done the best I can with this, happy to have it. But again, if I was going to start over and do this again, I would get a freestanding, separate, taller drill press. All of these are, with the exception of the disc and belt sander, all of these are bolted down rock solid to the bench, which is important. You get a lot of vibration from most of these tools, and it's good to know that they're going to stay in place. I don't know why this belt sander doesn't come with mounting holes, but whatever, we can live with it. It's got rubber feet, it's good. Other tools here on the bench, they're important. Actually, you know, we're going to say two things are important here. One is important to go ahead and build that little table down below. If you don't know this already, you'll find out that any flat surface that you have in your shop will very quickly become covered with something. So the more flat surfaces, the better. This is a really inexpensive chop saw that came in really handy in building all of these fixtures. All of this could have been done with the circular saw. It would have been slower and more aggravating. And then also down here on this workstation, I keep a little box with all of my files and sanding and similar type materials, and then a whole bunch of these random little scraps of wood, which are super handy to have around. You can see this one has a lot of drill holes in it. They're either handy to have around because when you're drilling through a piece of material, you want to back it with something, and you don't want that thing to be your finger, because you will drill holes in your finger. But also when you're clamping materials and you have to work over or around a flange, this is just an extra piece of material for the clamp to grab onto to overcome the depth of that flange. And then all different sorts of sanding files and different types of sandpaper, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. Scrap wood. Scrap wood is everywhere, and it is infinitely useful. So these are the basic building blocks of what I started with. I built those 2 benches over there. I built this bench. I bought all of these, obviously with the exception of the hand-me-down. I bought all of these benchtop tools, bolted them to the table. You might be wondering why it is that I have everything on casters if I have a good sized workspace and I don't have to move them that often. The reason is, let's run outside really quickly. The reason is that trailer back there. I go away for long periods of time for work, like 5 to 7 months. And when that happens, I don't want my project to be sitting at home gathering dust. And so when I decided that I was going to do this, I decided that I was going to build a workshop that I could effectively roll into my trailer and take with me wherever I go in the country so that I can continue working on the project when I'm there. Other niceties to have, I got a couple of these stools for my shop. So I'm not always dragging one around, and with any luck, someday I'll have a friend here hanging out, help me build this thing. Because so far, it's all been me, except for one rivet. I picked up a tool chest for the same purposes. I need to have something that's mobile that I can roll into the trailer out there when the time comes, and I sort of guessed at what would be an adequate sized tool chest to carry everything that I need. Generally speaking, I keep mostly on this lower portion here more general purpose tools, and then everything up here is more aviation related. I'll do a separate chapter explaining parts organization and everything like that. This workbench here, also hand-me-down, thank you, is really the only like structure that I had before this all began. I had this workbench and I had, you know, a couple of these folding tables. Another addition early on to the shop was trying to find a way to manage plans. And so I picked up a really inexpensive desktop easel from Hobby Lobby, I think, and then cut up a bunch of cardboard boxes in the right dimensions so that I could create a backing for all of these pages, and then just using regular document clips to hold them on. People will do these all number of ways. I've got a cork board over here where I have sort of a general overview of the wing, which is what I'm working on right now, and a couple other handy references like this little guide right here from Cleveland Tools explaining what the accurate starting point is for the gap on a squeezer when you change different rivet sizes. That's really handy to have, and conversion charts and whatnot. First aid kit, also an early addition to the shop. Super useful to have. Also important to have in your shop is not one, but two. Actually, just kidding. One shop vac. Over here, you produce so much mess. Aluminum dust and metal filings and little curly cues, and it accumulates really, really quickly. It's great to have a decent shop vac nearby. It doesn't need to be a monster like this. In fact, I would almost recommend against this for most of the stuff that you do. This is a really large diameter hose, which means that it's also really unwieldy. This other little one I have over here is just because I needed one for inside the trailer, and this is more than adequate, and it might be the best choice. Climbing implements, you need them. Really, for almost anything that you do in here, just a simple step stool would suffice. But if you're going to build structures like these, you need an actual ladder to get up there and get this stuff done. I think that these are 9.5 foot ceilings in this garage. So basically, when I started this build, I wanted to create two things. The first being essentially a portable airplane factory, if there is such a thing. And the second thing is a comfortable place to work while I'm here working, because the fact is, to this point, all of the work that's been done in the last 6 months has taken place here. None of it has gone out to the trailer. So creature comforts. This was an attractive feature to me when I bought this house, was the way this garage was laid out. It had this sort of large separate cubby area right here. So this was a good place to kind of make home, put in a spare TV that I had laying around, and junky old laptop that I had laying around, so that I have quick reference to the Slack group or Vans Air Force or ordering parts, and something to maybe keep me entertained when I'm mindlessly match drilling thousands of holes or dimpling or any of those sort of repetitive, tedious processes. But I would say that this is just a great thing to have to kind of provide some mental relief, and also the feeling that you're not doing it alone, and you have a quick access to being able to do more research without dragging all of that aluminum dust inside the house. Anything else notable? Yes, the shop. I did have not two, but I had one of these large shelving units right here. I think these are 7 feet each. I would say that this is adequate. I wouldn't want less than this for like a single kit. The empennage kit is quite small, the wing kit is quite large. This space was adequate for housing all of the large pieces of the wing kit until they started coming together. And then all of the smalls, of course, live in here and down in here. But this conversation, this part is really about these large shelves. I wouldn't want any less than this. In fact, I would probably want more than this, but I'm not willing to give up any more space in my workshop. And I know that I've got a pretty good amount of room, and I'm still, even with the wing stands here, I'm able to move about pretty freely. But I generally don't like to leave my lawnmower equipment outside, and I also generally don't want to feel like I'm constantly bumping into things. I like a little bit of space. All right, and then this is a late addition to the shop, but totally worth it, especially when you get into working on these wings where you're working kind of close to the floor on a lot of stuff. And this was so inexpensive, worth every penny, even if I only used it one day. And then lastly in the shop, I guess, would be some sort of service cart. It's a mess. It will never not be a mess, but it's great to be able to drag this mess to wherever you're working and have most of your most common, immediately used items with you at all times. I try to make sure that I've always got a respirator and ear pro, and then I have a lot of little odds and ends, and we'll talk more about them later, but I keep a lot of little odds and ends in this little grip mat right here. Speaking of tools, my little presentation was interrupted by UPS to come drop off something from Spruce. Let's see what we got. This is relevant to the ongoing flaring tool saga. If you're not up to date on it, I'm building my tanks, and what do we have here? Okay, we'll talk about these more later. But flaring tool, edge marker, these are not tools, but the servo brackets for the autopilot, and then some machine screws. And we'll talk more about that later. So let's see what actually showed up in the box today. This is a bonus here. We didn't think that we were going to get an unboxing video today on this channel. Amateur tip. If you're into like backyard fires, this stuff is the best. I'm into backyard fires. These are servo brackets. Ooh, This is the flaring tool right here. That is, okay. We'll talk about more about this later, and I'll probably talk about it several times in the channel. But the short version is, this is the effing flaring tool that I should have just bought the first time. I've got some AN6 screws, I think. I can't remember what, but I know what they are. Basically, moving the fuel servo from its normal mounting place to the back baffle right here. There's going to be one additional piece of material in that sandwich in the mounting, and so I bought just one length up in these screws, and I think that they are in 1/16 of an inch increments. So it might be unnecessary, but good to have, and they're not expensive. Da, 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 da. Edge marking tool. I should have bought this a long time ago. We'll talk about that. And then more fire materials. I think I have one other thing in this order from Spruce that hasn't showed up yet, and that is, one of the servos is coming from a different Spruce location. Another good thing to have in your workshop. Of course you need this one, but you need something like this that you can always have close to material, and then maybe a couple of buckets like this that you can have over here, because again, these messes pile up really quickly. Good to have. Haven't needed it. Hopefully I never will. And then a place to hang all of your clamps. I think that's good for the shop tour itself. In fact, it's probably overkill for sure. Anyways, let's just get into part one of the tools. Yeah, let's do that. Second bonus of the day. I'm out here getting all the tools kind of laid out for that whole part of the conversation, but FedEx just showed up. Who thought we'd get a second unboxing video, and a video that's not about unboxing? This one's from Vans. I think I know what it is. It's pretty big. Let's see. Had a lot of parts, not a lot. Had some sizable parts on back order for my wing kit. Let's see what we got today. Looks like we've got everything except for these rod end bearings, which is expected. So 4 rod end bearings, but is all of this stuff in here? It's pretty big, which means I probably have wing tips in there. Let's find out. Oh yeah. This stuff isn't fun for fires. Definitely got wingtips in there. Yeah, okay. Maybe all I have is wingtips in here. Could be. Could be that dude owes me a box. Let me see if this says one of whatever. This looks like it is only, well, I was gonna say it looks like it's only wingtips, but falling blade. Vans is pretty clever about how they pack this stuff. So I'm not surprised if they've got the smaller parts in the cavity of the wingtips. There we go. So I wouldn't be surprised if there are parts stuffed in these gits. Yep. The giblets are right here. Oh yeah. Whew. Look at all this campfire material. Sweet. Quick interruption before we go any further with this video. I just finished recording it, and I'm now back inside the house with the AC on. It is, what time is it? It's 5:45 in the evening, and this is what I've been dealing with all day. So Yep, I look like a total slob, and I look like a slob to the whole video, but it is what it is. We got it done. Still getting set up here, and yet another interruption. I promise I didn't plan it this way. It's the third unboxing of the day. I couldn't do it one-handed, so I already did it. But this one's from Vans, and I've been waiting on this for, I think, close to 2 weeks, so I'm excited to have it. It is the replacement access port that goes something like that right there. It doesn't have any cutouts or any spots for a fuel sender because we moved that one to the rear baffle on the tank that we're doing the inverted fuel. And then most importantly, the flop tube, the new fuel pickup that's going to go in that tank. And I was very curious to get this because I wanted to know if it had these little holes right here for safety wire, because I don't have any AN fittings like this. Well, it's part of the kit, which is awesome. The normal fuel sender attachment, which will be on the right tank, has an anti-rotation bracket. This is the result of an AD. It's now part of the kit, but formerly an AD, because with vibration, that AN fitting could and did, for some people, back off, and suddenly you can't suck fuel out of your fuel pickup. But for the flop tube, which will be mounted through this reinforcement angle right here, you can't really do that anti-rotation bracket. Therefore, you safety wire it through those little guys right there. And we did receive our safety wire pliers. I didn't go cheap on these. I got the Millbar safety wire pliers and some safety wire. So we're good to go. Let's get started in the actual tool discussion. I've tried to lay this stuff out in a way that will help me stay organized as I break this down into sections. But to begin, let's just start a baseline. I started out going to Cleveland Aircraft Tools and ordering, they have, if you haven't seen them, I'll put a link below, but they have kit bundles for different models of Vans aircraft. So I just did the RV-8 kit bundle, and there are some options that you can choose when you do that kit. You can opt to include an air drill. You can opt to do a C-frame or a DRDT2. And you can opt to use what they call a main squeeze, which is a manual squeezing tool, or to get a pneumatic squeezing tool. Neither one of them come with the yoke. The yoke is a separate piece of the kit. That's enough to get you started, and that's basically what I started with. I decided to go ahead, when I initially purchased my kit, I decided to stick with drill that I already had. I have a couple of these. And then I decided to go with the more expensive DRDT2 rather than the C-frame. If you're not familiar, this one works with an actuating handle, a lever. The C-frame has a ram and you drive it. This is a dimpling tool for skins. You drive the ram with a hammer. And then I decided to get the pneumatic squeezer as opposed to getting the manual squeezer, because I know how much I'm going to be using it. Later, I decided to go ahead, because you see that I've got it here, I decided to go ahead and get this. And I mean, before I even started building, I ordered the tools, my kit was still on order, and then maybe 2 weeks later, I thought, man, I know I'm going to end up wanting that, that air drill, and so I went ahead and got it. I don't regret it. That being said, if you opt for the 3 more expensive options when it comes to a drill, pneumatic squeezer and the DRDT2, the total price difference is about $720. So that cost me $720 more than if I had gone with manual squeezer, no drill, and the C-frame. By the way, the C-frame versus the DRDT2, I know that everybody loves this thing, but I also, I haven't heard anybody say that they hate the C-frame. So there you go. So that's the basic kit, and then also included in the kit, you can look it up online. It's got a ton of clecos, it's got a ton of drill bits and deburring tools, reamers, basically all the basic stuff that you're going to need that's not a sort of an ordinary tool that you might already have in your garage, all of those things to get you going. So that was my starting point, and then I added from there. The way that I have this laid out here, I'm trying to think of sort of a logical sequence in terms of the way the building goes. So let's start with marking and measuring. I've got a lot of different marking and measuring tools. The blue Sharpie, it's part of the kit. Blue Sharpies will come as part of the kit. I think you get like a bag of 5, and for whatever reason, the fine tip, the ultra fine tip blue Sharpie lasts longer on the aluminum than any other color, and it works great. You'll use it like crazy. But then a lot of different measuring tools, something that can get you really fine measurements, like down to a 64th of an inch. Having a decent quality set of calipers is definitely something that you should have. I've got a couple of pairs, but you use them all the time. A square, some kind of square, will save you in a jam. And then a digital angle finding tool. All of these measuring tools are ones that I bought separately. They weren't originally included in that kit from Vans. This center finding ruler, I use this thing a ton. If you look at it, it basically is a 24-inch ruler, but you have one 24-inch scale, but on the top it starts at a 0, and so if you want to find the middle of something, well, anyways, it's pretty self-explanatory, but I use this thing a ton. Other odds and ends that are sort of in that world of marking and measuring that I use is I went ahead and I picked up a rivet fan, rivet spacing tool. So anytime that you need to draw a line of rivets, this is a pre-punch kit, but it will come up from time to time. If you're fabricating parts or something like that, this is a quick and simple tool to do that. Highly recommend, not expensive. And then measuring, I guess it falls in the category, is an AN bolt gauge. I think that this was something that I purchased based on recommendations that I saw on Vans Air Force about trying to sort through all the small parts. This will save you so much time and aggravation when it comes to sorting out the parts that you get in a kit. If this is not something that you're doing already, like if you haven't already received a kit, I'll kind of clue you into something. You get bags of parts, and one bag might have 3 or 4 different screws or bolts or washer sizes or all of those mixed into one bag, packaged loosely, and you'll have the inventory will tell you what the contents of the bag are, but it's kind of up to you to determine which one is which. And some of these things look nearly identical. So having a tool that will help you quickly identify bolts and screws, separate those out, and then calipers and the internet are pretty handy in figuring out what those washers are. So measuring and marking, is there anything that I'm missing? Oh, well, it's still in the category of measuring. Doesn't really come into play with your empennage kit, but a little digital kitchen scale is something that's going to become really important to you when you get into making the fuel tanks and measuring out the Pro Seal or the tank sealant, because it is mixed by weight. These things are super inexpensive and they're great to have. I probably, just because of my job and other things, I've probably have 3 or 4 of these scattered around the world. I think for measuring and marking, and then, one more thing for measuring and marking. This is something that I've only used once, but it's worth having. It's a little gap tool. And again, I think I picked this up at Lowe's simply because there are some times when you'll be scratching your head about tolerances. And this doesn't come up very often, but it can. And that is, if you have, say, a rib flange meeting up to a spar and the flange is pulling away a little bit, after the rivet is set, if you see a little gap right there, there is a maximum amount of gap that's allowed. So this is a quick way, just a feeler gauge to go in there and see if it's within spec. Anyways, marking and measuring. From marking and measuring, we go on to like making holes and cuts and getting stuff ready. With a Vans RV-8 for sure, you do a lot of final size drilling. You do a fair amount of just straight up match drilling. One part has holes, the other one doesn't. You use this one for a guide. You drill all the way through. The kit that you get from Cleveland comes with a lot of different drill bits. Obviously, the most common ones that you'll be using will be a number 40 and a number 30. I just made a little out of a chunk of spare wood. I made a little drill index. This is pretty important to have because, especially in the beginning, these smaller drill bits all kind of look the same. Until you're used to handling them and using them over and over again, you'll use something else that I highly recommend that you have. This guy right here. This will save you trying to read the print on these, on the shanks of these drill bits can be a real pain in the butt. So just get yourself a cheap magnifying glass. So you have a bunch of the standard sizes, and then this is just sort of a little amateur tip. Go ahead and order a bunch more. These things can dull pretty quickly. I mean, you're literally drilling thousands of holes, and they're very inexpensive. I think these are like, I don't know, I think a bag of 5 costs like $7 maybe for the number 40 and the number 30. With your kit, you also get reamers, which are, if you're unfamiliar, maybe it's a hole that's just not quite final size, which is how the Vans RV-8 kit mostly comes. Most of the holes are just slightly undersized, and so it'd be overkill to come in there with the drill bit and open up that hole. Use a reamer. A reamer gives, just opens it up a little bit and leaves it much cleaner and much less necessity for deburring afterwards. That's part of the Cleveland kit. The Cleveland kit also comes with an assortment of countersink bits and one microstop countersink cage. I've seen some people have multiples of these. I would recommend it. I don't have a second one yet, and I just recently did an order with Spruce for some things, and I should have thrown one of these in. If you know that you're in, especially when you get into the wings, when you're doing literally hundreds upon hundreds of countersinks, and they could be for different depths or for different size hole openings. If you had one dedicated if you had one dedicated microstop countersink cage for one purpose and another for it would save you a lot of time, because if you follow this channel, you know that I spend a lot of time when I move on to countersinking, taking a piece of scrap material, drilling a hole, countersinking until I get the depth just right. You never want to assume that this is set right when you pick it up and you didn't just use it 5 minutes ago. You should always test it on scrap. Even if what I talked about, you have a dedicated one that's already set up, still test it on a piece of scrap first, just to make sure. These bits do dull, pressure changes, just don't ruin a piece of material when you can just ruin a piece of scrap. Drill stops. These are not part of the kit. I highly, highly recommend getting a set of these, and there will come a point in the plans when the plans tells you to use a drill stop, because on this main spar for the wings, right up here, when you're drilling to put the attach brackets or the spacers, Z brackets, whatever you want to call them, for the fuel tanks, there's going to be a point where you're match drilling holes through a Z bracket, and if you don't have a drill stop, you will most definitely put a really nasty mark in that beautiful spar. So drill stops will potentially save you a lot of heartache, and they're very inexpensive and worth having around. In the kit from Cleveland, you also get some big ass reamers too. There are going to come times, not very often, but there will come times when you have to drill really large holes or ream out very, very large holes for attachments. I haven't gotten into too many of those yet, but I know that as we get to the point of putting the fuselage together or mounting the wings to the plane, mounting the empennage to the fuselage, etc., those things are going to become important. These two 12-inch bits are super important. And by the way, I want to say that Cleveland was really thoughtful in the way they put this kit together. They didn't randomly go, maybe somebody would want a 12-inch bit. You will absolutely need 12-inch bits. There's a number 30 and a number 40. So if you're not getting just a pre-packaged kit from Cleveland, make sure that you have those. There are places where you absolutely cannot get close enough with a drill without bending something that shouldn't be bent. So you'll use those a lot. And then the other thing in the drilling category that I have here is just a plain old drill index with a lot of different drill sizes. You're gonna find having something like this very useful when it comes to drilling out rivets. A number 40 drill bit is just a little bit over 3/32 seconds. A number 30 drill bit is just a little bit over 1/8 of an inch. And so when it comes time to drill out rivets, which you invariably will have to do, if you can go with something that's just a little bit less than a 40 or a little bit less than a 30, you stand a good chance of carefully drilling through the center of the head of that rivet without touching the skin or the edge of the hole around it. And then grabbing something like this. This is a 1/8 inch steel punch that I stole from like a gunsmithing kit that I have in my tool case to break off the head of the rivet, and then use a center punch to push it the rest of the way through. So drilling, countersinking, a unibit. This is also part of the kit from Cleveland. Definitely something that needs to be a part of your kit. You're going to have to drill some larger holes that need to be really clean. This is a step bit that's broken up into 1/16 of an inch landings or increments. It's an absolute must-have. And let's see, in the same realm, that. I think we got drilling covered in terms of like the bits and whatnot. The other thing to consider in drilling is the tool. So I said that I got the Nova Palm 4000 RPM, blah, 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 whatever. The great thing about using the air tool is that you are doing thousands and thousands of repeated actions, and this is just a quarter or a third of the weight of this. It can be done with this. And many people do it entirely with this. But this is much lighter and it's much faster, which is just better, quicker for aluminum. I use both of them. It's great to have more than one because I can have one, the drill bit that I'm using over and over and over again, I can have here. And then if there's an odd hole every now and then, I can grab this one and just do that without changing this out. So on this topic right here, the 10-foot lightweight hose for your air tools. This is, I think that this is actually included in that basic kit from Cleveland. I would say that this is a must-have. I would not want to, this just makes life so much easier. I wouldn't want to be lugging around the really heavy hose, dragging that around. That makes things a lot better. So we're still in the drilling department. Okay. This is a tool that I ended up ordering later on, but it's an absolute necessity. And I think that even in the beginning, from watching other builders, I knew that I was going to need this at some point, and I probably held off for a month or two before I bought it. But this is basically a right angle attachment for the drill. There are going to be many places where this is the only thing that can get in these awkward positions to drill. This is a great tool to have. And whether you get it when you start or whether you get it later on, you're definitely going to end up getting that tool. Still in the drilling world. Oh, well, okay, we'll continue this drilling, making holes. We'll include in that countersinking, because we've talked about the countersink cage. The Avery deburring tool, this is one that you see a lot right here. You have a long extension that you can add to this, or you can just take, but this is the key right here. This is not something that I started with, and this is something that I ended up getting much later, and didn't know that I wanted it until I had it. What I got with the kit instead was this this deburring tool right here that you set up with a small, very slow electric screwdriver. And I do love this thing. It works great, especially for the thousands of holes that you're going to be deburring. That being said, this is a really great tool that you can use not only for deburring, but for countersinking in those situations where you need to countersink manually, where you can't fit a countersink cage in there. This works brilliantly for that. So not part of the Cleveland kit, should be part of your kit, 100%, the Avery deburring tool. So we're, let's see, no, we're going to stay with countersinking. We won't get into deburring yet. This just happens to be a deburring tool that can countersink, which is especially useful when you get into these 1097 rivets. Am I missing anything in the world of drilling? Yes, the drill press. When I did the shop tour, I talked a little bit about it, but I should talk a little bit more about it here. Even early on in the empennage kit, in the very first section when you're doing the horizontal stabilizer, you need to drill some pretty big holes for the two bolts that attach, or the bolts that attach the main bearing brackets on that. I think that you absolutely need, I would absolutely want to have a drill press. If I've got a piece of material that's pretty thick and heavy, and it's really important that I drill very straight through it, I'm going to use the drill press for that. So sometimes you have to be pretty creative on how you get things clamped down, but I think that a drill press is a must-have. In fact, while we're here for a second, the bench tools that I kind of walked around and showed you during the shop tour, I think all of them are absolute must-haves. I wouldn't want to build with any of those pieces missing. So it's a heavy vise, combination disc and belt sander. I use both of them. The buffing wheel that is used for the Scotch-Brite wheel, that obviously is invaluable. The drill press we just talked about, and the bandsaw, you use a ton. You'd be surprised how often you use all of that stuff. That's the world of drilling. Let's talk about cutting. Cutting metal, it's not something that you do every day, but you definitely do it. And then when you are into it, it seems like it's something that you do a whole bunch of. I talked a little bit before about the bandsaw. I absolutely would not want to do this without that. But in the very beginning, it seemed to have less utility than it did later. And that's because in the very beginning, I didn't get a metal cutting bandsaw blade. I went on the forums, and it seemed like the consensus was that aluminum is a soft material. This is a very thin material. The blade that your bandsaw came with should be just fine. And I did cut aluminum with it, and it does cut through it, but it leaves pretty nasty edges. I went ahead and bought a $9 or $10 metal cutting bandsaw blade, and it made all the difference in the world. It's one of my favorite tools now. So definitely do that. Don't even bother with that, you know, whatever it is, like 4 tooth per inch bandsaw blade that it comes with. Just get a decent, inexpensive metal cutting bandsaw blade and put a few more in your cart in Amazon, because you'll end up ruining some of them at some point when you try to cut steel with it, like I did. But they're very inexpensive, very necessary. So that's one cutting tool. These are other cutting tools. These are easy to buy in a set at a big box store, but they're basically tin snips, and you have 3 different ones because they cut 3 different ways. Whether you're making a straight cut or you're trying to keep a clean edge on the left or a clean edge on the right, you will use these. I don't use them a ton, but there are definitely points when I'd be stuck if I didn't have them. And when it comes to cutting metal, the only other things that I would maybe recommend in that realm, I don't think I want to open it up, but I will say there are points when you're probably going to have to deal with a little bit of steel and your bandsaw is not going to cut that. Just a fairly inexpensive hacksaw works pretty well to get through that. A Dremel oscillating tool I found pretty helpful with the right attachment for getting through steel. When I built these wing stands behind me, these long pieces of threaded rod I needed to cut down so I wasn't snagging myself as I was walking through there. This tool proved pretty handy for that purpose. And then lastly, the handy dandy Dremel tool. I've been using this quite a bit more than I ever expected to, but I would say especially having a Dremel tool is great if you've got one that has the long wand extension for fine work. That works great, but the Dremel tool and the little cutoff wheels in the Dremel tool are invaluable for steel, but also for getting into getting the small spaces and things like that. Even with the aluminum, Dremel tool invaluable. You probably saw me, you have to cut these funky shaped holes inside of the rear spar. Yeah, inside of the rear spar for the wing, these funky shaped holes for the aileron torque tube or whatever to pass through. So invaluable for that. I wonder if there's anything else really to say about cutting that's not related to moving on to edge finishing, which is sort of the next logical step in the process. When it comes to edge finishing, you need to make sure, obviously, that all the holes are deburred and that all the edges are deburred and cleaned up as well, so you don't cut yourself, and also so you don't have places for stress risers that can form cracks eventually. So, deburring tools. I touched briefly on the Avery deburring tool right here, and I didn't really demonstrate it, but this long extension is really helpful. I really do wish that I had this deburring tool from the very beginning. This extension right here, this really helps you when you're trying to deburr the holes on the inside of flanges on something narrow like a spar. You can't get this fat thing down in there, but this can reach across, and it works great for that purpose. So this is probably in this video my 3rd or 4th endorsement for the Avery deburring tool. You should definitely have it. This does save a lot of, I think, a lot of aggravation that you can go through very quickly and will very comfortably go through hundreds of holes of deburring. Keeping in mind that deburring is simply that. It's just deburring the hole. You don't want to take off too much material. You don't want to chamfer the edge. And if you are aggressive with this tool, you can do that. It's a little bit more difficult to do it with this. So that's just a note. Don't go crazy when you're deburring. And then when it comes to edge finishing, we have the Scotch-Brite wheel that came with the kit. Scotch-Brite wheels are not inexpensive, but they are invaluable. You absolutely need that. And if you haven't gotten one yet and you get it and it seems like your grinder or whatever you're attaching it to is going crazy, you need to dress the wheel. Gosh, I don't have it anymore. But dressing the wheel, I'll grab a piece of scrap wood for an example. That's not a good piece of scrap wood. Any wheel that you put on that thing is going to be a little bit out of round. They're never quite perfect, and so it's going to wobble like crazy. It's going to drive you crazy. And so the solution to that is to take a Sharpie and just draw a line all the way around the center of that wheel, and then take a piece of wood like this and put like glue down some pretty heavy grit sandpaper. And while the wheel's spinning right here, lift this piece of wood, the sandpaper, up until it's just touching the wheel. And it will go whoomp, 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 whoomp as each time around the high spot makes contact. And eventually you'll start to see part of that line wear away. And as the line starts to wear away, that's wearing away the high spot until eventually the entire line wears away and you have a wheel that is more or less in round. So dressing the wheel will make you a lot happier about your choice of tools. So I also have smaller Scotch-Brite wheels. You've probably seen me use this. This is a 2-inch Scotch-Brite wheel, but I put this in the chuck on the drill press. And then for the, let's grab one right here. These ribs, I say there are 54 ribs because there are 2 parts. It's not 54 across. It's 2 parts, but whatever. When you're prepping all of these ribs, this is a great tool to get in there and deburr the lightning holes. It's really quick and easy to do this on the drill press, and so that was worth the price of admission. Sometimes there are smaller holes, and for that I've got a 1-inch Scotch-Brite wheel on a die grinder. This is also very helpful. I don't use this as much for a couple of reasons. This is a very high speed tool, and it's really easy, something that when you're holding a floppy piece of material and something that's moving this fast, to get it to run away on you. So I use this one with caution, but it is helpful when I need it, not only for the lightning holes, but also some nasty spots. If I'm edge finishing, this can make pretty quick work of knocking down a nasty burr that's taking a long time using something else. And by the way, these tools that I'm describing right now, that Scotch-Brite wheel, the main Scotch-Brite wheel that is on the grinder, comes with the Cleveland kit. Everything else is stuff that I bought separately and I accumulated over time. And then this is another deburring tool that comes with the kit, and then I ended up buying a couple of more attachments for it. This particular one allows me to get into wider holes and scrape or drag along the edges, and there's another V-shaped one that I think I have over here. So there are a few different attachments for this deburring tool. I think that this one and this one, I think these two are the ones that I bought separately. This is a nice little edge finishing tool to drag along those long straight edges of skins, and this little one allows me to hook through a rivet hole and deburr the other side. So this is a handy tool. I don't use it all the time, but I do get a lot of use out of it. Continuing with edge finishing, this is important. Stacks on stacks on stacks of files and sandpaper. So with the Cleveland kit, you get this Vixen file. I'm hoping I'm not blowing up that camera with this box right here, but you get this Vixen file. I didn't use this very much at the beginning. It has really grown on me. This is an extremely useful tool for finishing the edges on the skins. Yeah, it just takes a little bit of practice, but I have fallen in love with this. And then the other thing that I use very often is much finer. I got a set of these. This is an Organ brand from Lowe's. Chainsaw files. It comes in a set with a nice flat file and then a really nice round file that you'll get a ton of use out of. That's not the one. It's in here. You get a ton of use out of these round files, especially like little needle files. So just a selection. They don't have to be expensive, but you do have to have them and you'll use them a lot. So having a good flat file, the Vixen file that comes with the kit, but another finer flat file to knock down edges to a smoother consistency, and then a couple of different sizes of round files to help you in some of those little notches that you invariably will have to get into. Additionally, I have some of this, tear off a piece here. This is like a fiber sandpaper, so like paper-backed sandpaper in a nice roll like this. This stuff works great for getting in the little nooks and crannies inside of the brakes and the flanges and whatnot. So those are always good to have. And then just any other bunches of sandpaper you have laying around are always helpful, just to remove a little bit of a material to clean up an edge and stuff like that. So I kind of tend to keep all these things grouped together in one bin. What are we talking about? We're still talking about edge finishing. So edge finishing, deburring, cleaning up. We've talked about the different Scotch-Brite wheels. We've talked about files. We've talked about sandpaper. That might be it for edge finishing. So now we're going to start putting stuff together, I suppose, fastening things. In the world of fastening, in terms of what you get in the kit from Cleveland, you get a ton of Clecos, and as it turns out, a ton of Clecos is about a half ton short of what you actually need. I keep all of mine in these little plastic tubs that I bought, I don't know, really cheap from Home Depot or something like that. You have different sizes of Clecos depending on the different size holes. So these silver ones are for the 3/32 holes, or the number 40 holes. You have these copper looking ones, which are for the number 30 or 1/8 inch holes. And then you have these big fat brass ones. I think I've got maybe 8 or 10 of these things. I honestly have never used these. They came with the kit, so there's going to come a point when there's a use for them, but I haven't found a hole that they fit yet. And then lastly, and really importantly, is these Cleco clamps are a total lifesaver. So yeah, these are all that came with the kit. So the only thing that I'll say about the fasteners with respect to Clecos, the Cleveland kit comes with 2 sets of Cleco pliers, which if you're somebody like me building by yourself, you'll find out really quickly. I'm sure glad I have 2 sets. You'd think you'd want it for 2 people. I guess for 2 people, maybe you'd want 4. You're always leaving them somewhere, so it's great to have 2 pair. But the other thing is, so far, I haven't gotten in any situations where I've been running out of the larger, the 1/8 inch, the copper looking Clecos, but the silver ones, totally ran out of them when I was trying to do the wings. And maybe if I was only doing 1 wing at a time, I would be fine, but doing 2 wings at a time, it wasn't enough. And I want to say the pack that I got from Vans, let me double check my notes here to make sure I'm not lying to you. Okay, yeah, so the pack that you get, not from Vans, I'm sorry, but from Cleveland, you get 13 bags of 20. You get 325 of those silver colored Clecos. I was woefully short once I decided I was going to build both wings at the same time. I ordered 200 more, which now puts me at 525, and I have gotten those after I was at like the peak Cleco crisis, and so I haven't had a chance to really test if 525 is adequate. We'll see here once we get the fuel tanks finished up. So you know you're going to buy them eventually, so why don't just start with 500 Clecos? You're going to want more. So that's what I would say about that for fastening. And then fastening next, I guess, would be sort of actually attaching, which would be riveting things together. Now we're going to get back into talking about the Cleveland kit and how all of that works. I think I think in the Cleveland kit, you're given a choice between a 2X and a 3X gun, I think. I could be wrong about that. It could be that that used to be a choice and now they always just go with the 3X. I think that when I was doing my research about it, and being a guy who's never riveted anything before, the consensus was just go ahead and go with the 3X. It can be a little bit more difficult to work with because it hits harder, but if you go 2X, you're going to find yourself in a jam at some point where there are larger rivets that you just can't set. And so just take the time to learn how to use the 3X gun. So that's what I got. What the Cleveland kit comes with is the gun. It comes with a flow regulator. Learn how to use this. And we're going to take a little time out here. I'm going to talk about it right now. The flow regulator is what determines how hard this gun is going to be hit while you're using it. The tank is always going to be left at 90 psi. The flow regulator is how you're going to determine it. And when I started using this thing, there are little numbers 1 through 6 on this dial right here. 1 through 6 on here. So I thought that this was graded on a scale of 1 through 6, but if I turned from 1 to 6, I couldn't really perceive any significant difference in the way this thing was hitting. And it was, for a guy who's never riveted before, it was kind of like riding a bull. I was making a mess on my practice kit, my Van sign back there, the first few things that I riveted. It was really intimidating. I didn't want to do any buck rivets, and knowing that I have to do probably 15,000 of them, but I don't want to because it's hard to work with. Eventually, I bought something else that you should own, which is the Standard Aircraft Handbook for Mechanics and Technicians. And this is a absolute required reference to have if you're building an airplane. And so I read about rivet guns and riveting and flow regulators and came out and did a little bit of experimentation. And it's the kind of stuff you would think that I had done in the beginning. But those little marks mean nothing. This thing has a range of travel that's like a ½ inch. So you can go from almost nothing to just pounding a hole in the middle of the table. You have that much control with it. Once you figure that out, and by you I mean me, once you figure that out, bucking rivets becomes an entirely different thing. Entirely different thing. So that's important. That comes with the kit. As I said before, whether you get the main squeezer or the pneumatic squeezer, the kit, the yoke is a separate piece. It's included in the kit, and the one that's included in the kit is the 3-inch yoke, which you will use a ton of. That's a 3-inch yoke. It's got a pretty good reach, but it's not the only yoke that you're going to use. But if you want the basic kit, it's the only yoke that you've got. In a very short amount of time, I went ahead and I ordered, I think I first ordered, gosh, maybe I ordered them together. I don't know, but this one is commonly referred to as a no-hole yoke, also a thin yoke, and that's because you can see here that there's no hole here to put a die. So this is for flush applications only, whether it's squeezing the shop head flush or working on the flush side of a countersunk rivet. Either way, you have a really thin end to this. If you compare that to, the 3-inch, it's about half the thickness, and there are going to be a lot of tight spots that you need to get into where some of these, especially like nearing the trailing edges of the elevators, where those spars become very narrow and you have to do a rivet on top of the spar and on the bottom of the spar, the skin to the flange on that rib. This will make your life a lot easier, a lot easier. Highly recommend, because you're gonna get in a bind. And then the other one that I ended up buying, again, not part of the kit, separately, is what people call a longeron yoke. Because that's when you absolutely need it. But this is a yoke that has a nice wide mouth in it so that you can get over flanges. And if you use this yoke in combination with like this ½ inch die on both ends of it, you can get around two flanges at the same time, and you'll be able to squeeze rivets that you thought were unsqueezable because of what you had before. So this, I would say, with all three of the yokes that I have, I can't pick a favorite child. I use all of them a lot. So to that end, your quick release pins, these things end up getting gummy and dirty. I've seen versions of these that have little D-rings on them to make them easier to pull out. Just always have something handy, like a little bit of lube or WD-40 or something like that, to keep those things moving freely, because there are going to be times when you're changing yokes several times in a single work session. So that gets us into the conversation. We've gone from the rivet gun, still in the rivet gun, sorry. The rivet gun also comes with a back rivet set. We talked about back riveting. It comes with a back rivet set, and the kit also comes with a back rivet plate right here. I don't think we need to get into a discussion about what back riveting is, but there you go. There's a back rivet plate with a back rivet set for the gun, and this sort of like beehive spring is what keeps it attached to the gun. And while we're on that topic, if you can see over on this, I don't know if you can, I've got a piece of blue tape over there. I would recommend to you, this is just an amateur tip here, when you're back riveting, you've got the skin laid over the top of that thing, you can really quickly lose track of where you're riveting in relationship to that back riveting plate. So what I did when I do back riveting, I put a big piece of blue tape so that I can just look at the edge of the table and know that blue tape is aligned with that, and therefore my rivet row should be aligned with the blue tape. Anyways, that's all I'm going to say about that. You got the back rivet set. You have an 1/8 inch cup set for the universal head rivets, and then you have an 1/8 inch double offset. And I have used this more than I wanted to, and I have to use it a lot more. This is a pretty challenging tool to work with, but absolutely necessary, because it offsets the rivet gun so that you can get straight down force on whatever you're trying to drive without bending things out of the way. So it comes with all three of those sets and a mushroom set, so for setting flush rivets. This one that you see here on the table is one that I bought separately from, I think, Brown Aircraft Tool, because I saw somebody online using it, and this is before I had any experience really with riveting on the skins, and I saw that it's got this nice fat shiny face, and then it's got this nice rubber baby buggy bumper around the edge, and I thought that would probably be pretty great. I've only used it once or twice, and the reason is this spring, this is a different head, different size head, and a different size shank, and so this spring doesn't fit easily over that, and I don't want to wear that spring out. I'd probably need a different spring, but this probably ended up just to be, it's probably a waste of money. We'll find out. I don't think I need it. Turns out this works great. Okay, that's it for the rivet gun. The squeezer is not technically a rivet squeezer. It's a pneumatic dimpling tool that turns out that it works great for squeezing rivets, and that's what it gets most of its use for. This, I mentioned, is an upgrade within the kit. So you can either get the C-frame, which is a Cleveland Tools proprietary product that's supposed to be great, a manual squeezing tool, or you can get this pneumatic one. And while it's expensive, it's not as expensive as it should be. I think that you look at mine, it's obviously dirty because I've been using Pro Seal, but you can see that there's just some blotchiness and stuff like that. I think that the way they source them is that whoever makes them for the big aircraft manufacturers, the ones that are blemished, meaning cosmetically, they sell them off. And so you get it at a huge discount. This is, I would not want to build the airplane without this. I've never used this, the main squeeze. I've never used a manual squeezer, but after using this as much as I have, I would not want to do the plane without that squeezer. So that's another thing I recommend. On the topic of riveting, again, we talked about the back rivet plate, bucking bars. The one that's in my hand right here, that needs to be cleaned up. It's got a nice fat gooey piece of Pro Seal there on it. the bucking bar that comes with the kit is the one that I have in my hand. I think that this is a perfectly adequate bucking bar, but you will find yourself in situations where the geometry of this is probably not going to work out for you. I ended up going back and ordering this one from Cleveland. It's called the trailing edge tool or bucking bar to help when I need to buck rivets in those really tight spaces, like in the trailing edges of the spars, or rather like say the elevator rib end ribs. Turns out it has been very useful for that, but there are parts in there that actually this still won't get into. There are parts in there where this is still too thick to grab onto that. And I had to figure out a way to set those rivets. That's why I have this sitting out. I actually used this to wedge in to those very narrow spots just to get it up, and then to hit it a couple of times with the gun just to pre-squeeze that rivet just enough that then I could go in and use this bucking bar. So people always kind of wonder how you solve that problem, and there are a number of different solutions. This is the one that worked out for me to get to those tough spots, which is why I have this weird hole saw sitting here with all this stuff. And then finally, this last bucking bar, I think I probably bought this because I saw it a lot, and I'm not going to say that it's necessary. I mean, it can get into maybe some shorter spots that this can, but this is a heavier bucking bar, and it does make a huge difference on how easy it is to buck rivets, because it's so much more mass that when you're holding the bucking bar to the shop head of the rivet and hitting it with the gun, you don't need to apply as much pressure, like putting the two pieces together. It's doing a lot of the work for you. So you don't need it. You don't need it. I use both of these. If you watch me building the tanks, doing the interior ribs, I use both of these a lot. There are a lot of times where this one actually wouldn't work when you get to where there you have the flange of the rib meeting up against the edge of those spacers in there, or rather the stiffeners. This one's, no matter which way you put this one, it's too fat because it's going to be interfering with something. So this one is perfect for that. And this one, I was wondering if I was ever going to use it again. I ended up having to use it quite a bit when setting the nut plates for the inboard most Z bracket for the fuel tank mount. So I do use all three of these. This is my favorite one, but I wouldn't be able to do it without this one. Riveting, continuing. Rivet puller, you have to have it. It doesn't come with the kit. It's super cheap. You can get it at Harbor Freight or anywhere. It's a very simple tool to use. If you wanted to, you could go with the pneumatic rivet puller. I don't think that that's really necessary for this kit with the RV-12, which is made entirely with pull rivets. You'd absolutely want one. But for my purposes, this is perfect, and I've used it quite a bit to this point, and absolutely no complaints. Super easy tool, super necessary. In the topic of riveting, from Cleveland, you also get dies. So you end up with, and so these are dies that can be placed in the squeezer for riveting. I guess I should explain that. So you end up with three different sizes of flat or flush dies, and then one universal head or cup die. And then these other ones, we haven't gotten into that topic yet, but these are all dimple dies that you can use either in the squeezer or in the DRDT2 dimpler. So I think that might vary. No, not quite. Oops rivets. These are 1097K rivets. I'm not an expert on this, but I do use them. Basically what you have are flush rivets that have a shallower countersink on them, and they're kind of like hole savers. So if I had a number 40 hole for a 3/32 rivet, and I had to drill it out, and in the process of drilling it out, I ended up messing up that hole. I can drill it up to a number 30 or a 1/8, and in my Oops rivet kit, I can find a rivet that has the 1/8 inch shank, but will fit the dimple for the number 40 hole. So that's one use case for these, but you'll also end up using these in other places where you need to sneak a a couple countersunk rivets under another piece that's fitting over. Then maybe it's not structural, but it's to hold pieces together. You can use these and your Avery deburring countersinking tool to create a really shallow countersink. And I've done this a couple times already, working on the wings or in the fuel tanks. So they're very useful for that. It's a kit. It comes as a kit like this. It says Avery Tools and Fab. I think it comes from Aircraft Spruce for like 30 bucks. It's something that you should have in your kit. You're going to use it sooner or later. Is there anything else on riveting that we need to talk about? I think that's going to cover the riveting tools. I think that covers it. So we did talk about edge finishing. We didn't talk about dimpling. The DRDT2 here is sort of like the Rolls Royce of dimpling. I don't know. I just know that it's the one everybody wanted because it's the easiest to use. It gives you the best results because it can give you very consistent results. It's actuated by an arm right here. You get it adjusted so that it gives you a nice firm compression of the material using the dimple dies. All of these, this whole set, all of these dies and the rivet set, all of these and this little clear holder, this was part of the kit from Cleveland. So you have the dimple dies that you'll use a lot. A lot would be the number 40 because the skins are completely covered with 3/32 flush head rivets. And then you'll use a lot of the number 30, the number 30, the 1/8 inch die as well. And then there will be occasions when you do need to use the larger sizes. And one of those examples is the number 19, I think it is, for the attached screws for the fuel tanks. And then also for the smaller attached screws that we use for the access panels on the bottom of the wing. So you have all of those are included. And I've only had the Cleveland dies and I've only used the DRDT2, but it seems like these are sort of the top product in that space. Like everybody seems to agree that the best dimples that you can get are from the dies that Cleveland makes. And I think that that's really how Cleveland put their mark on the map, was engineering their own new dies because they weren't happy with what they were getting when they were trying to build show quality planes. That's the legend. Anyways, so yeah, that's it for dimpling. Got the squeezer and I got the DRDT2. That doesn't cover dimpling completely. This is really important actually. I'll move the GoPro for this. Sometimes you need to dimple into a spot that you just cannot reach with any of those tools, and that's what these two tools are for right here. This one is well, they're both close quarters dimple tools, but this one I didn't understand for a long time. It was just something that came in my kit and I didn't understand what you did with it. But you screw it to the end of your bench with this hanging out here. This is a 3/32 female die. And then you place your piece of work when we talked about the like the end ribs for the elevators, that really narrow spot. How do you possibly dimple that? You slide that piece over here, and then you put the male die. You put the male die on a ram for a C-frame, which I don't have, or you roll the dice and you take the ram out of your rivet squeezer and use that. And you hold it and you give it a couple whacks with a hammer, and you'll hear a pretty distinct sound when that dimple is properly formed, which by the way is what you're going with on the C-frame. There's a sound that you're listening for to get consistent results. So that's what this one is. And then the one next to it right here is a little tool that you pull. You use use a rivet puller, and you use either one of these copper mandrels or this finish nail, depending on what you're working in and how stubborn it is. And then you've got a little set of 3/32 dies, and so you put one on one side, one on the other. Use this as the mandrel, pull it together. So this is really great for close quarters dimpling in the middle of a skin. So deep in the corner of a skin, obviously you can't put it on this piece. That works great. Comes with the kit, absolutely necessary. You're kind of in trouble without it. I think that covers this on dimpling. No, it doesn't. It doesn't cover us on dimpling. I told you that I modified these benches to accommodate the DRDT2. In the plans, like the instructions when you get this piece, I think they provide plans or ideas for like a little table. So you would put this on top of your bench and then build a little platform table that fits around it, which is fine. A lot of people do it. I don't know where. I just think like cruising through Vans Air Force and doing random research when I didn't even know what questions to ask. I saw somebody had done this, and I showed you earlier, but basically it's just a couple of 2x4s, and then I mounted the bottom of the DRDT2. I mounted the bottom of it onto a piece of plywood, screwed down there, and what I like about this is that whatever I'm dimpling, the whole bench is a work surface, and if I need to adjust it, as you just saw, I can slide this thing in or out so I can get a deeper reach. If it ever feels wobbly or unstable, I just grab a couple of big trigger clamps and just clamp the tables together to tighten it up a little bit. The only thing different that I did, so I mounted it down here with that piece of board, and then when I'm done with it, I just take it off and put it under a table. The only other thing I did to it was, you might have seen that I oftentimes have this gray indoor-outdoor carpet laid out on my benches. I took a piece of like 1/8" foam core, used some spray adhesive, set it down right here, and then put the carpet over the top of it. So when I say that the whole thing is flush, I mean the whole thing is flush. This whole work surface is flush with the catcher for the die right here. So that's what I did with that. It's a great tool, highly recommend. Never used a C-frame, but I know that I'm getting consistent results with this all the time. Same thing every single pull. I think that brings us to the end of dimpling. We do have other metal forming tools. Sometimes it's not just about dimpling and edge finishing and cutting holes, but we have to bend flanges, and we have to form edges where we have parts overlapping, and we have to flute flanges so that when they come out of the form, they're a little bit bowed, we can pull those pieces back together by fluting. So all three of these pieces, these are hand seamers. Should get my camera back here. These are hand seamers, pretty straightforward. You're able to grab onto a piece of metal and put a nice controlled bend in it. These are fluting pliers. You've got a male and a female portion so that you can create a little scallop in the material that you're squeezing, and by scalloping it, fluting it, you basically shorten the length of that material over the span, and it will straighten ribs out or get holes lined up in ribs. And then finally, an edge forming tool. This is a clever little tool that will just put just an ever so slight bend on the edge of a skin, like in the last 1/8 of an inch of the skin, so that when that skin overlaps another one, instead of getting it lifting up a little bit, it's going to sit nice and snug and actually have a little bit of pressure, so it's going to hold down and create a nice edge. All three of these pieces are just part of the basic kit from Cleveland. So those are your metal forming tools. The only tool, there are two other tools for so-called metal forming that weren't part of the kit that I use. One of them more often than I would like to. And I think that this is something that is maybe in section 5 of the Vans of the plans for your kit. Section 5 is the same for everybody. It's the thing that talks about all the stuff. How to rivet, how to drill, how to cut, whatever. And one of the things it suggests is making a pair of pliers, or taking an inexpensive pair of dikes like this, and then grinding it down so that one side of it is flush. You don't have any sort of concave, so that you can get flush to a rivet. You need to cut the tail off of a bad rivet. You can get right flush to the skin and pinch it and break it off. And if you're looking at it, you can see that I overdid a little bit, so I have a gap right there. So this isn't great, but I've used it a lot and it has worked really well for me. So this goes in the category of tools you make, but it's in the metal forming kind of tools. I keep it in that drawer. The other one, I'm gonna pick it up. I'm not really gonna set it anywhere, I suppose, because it's kind of a beast. But I made it. And you saw this in a video when I was talking about, well, you saw me make it when I was the video for wing fixtures. This is a tool for bending the flanges of the ribs, specifically the wing ribs, bending the flanges to 90 degrees. To reiterate, or as just a reminder, when these formed pieces come out of the form blocks, they can be a little bit deformed. It's a lot of forming. Anyways, those flanges need to be a perfect or nearly perfect 90 degrees so they fit nice and flush against the skin, and they're not. They're a little bit off. And so this is a tool that allows you to do them much more quickly and consistently than you could do them with hand seamers. And so I spent a couple of hours putting this thing together. If you want specific instructions on this, I can add that, but barring that, I'll try to put a link in the description below to the video that I watched, and I basically just sort of copied what I was looking at with the guy who made this one. But this is very helpful, again, in the category of tools you make. If you're wondering why I'm trying to make a 90-degree bend, but that looks like it's not 90, it's because it's not. If you cut this thing so it goes 11 degrees past 90, the flange will spring back to 90. So anyways, haven't used this thing since I did the rib prep for the wings, but I'm super glad that I had it when I did. I think that it probably saved me a lot of time. So that is metal forming. Is there anything else in the metal forming category? I'll say yes. We're going to include tubing, like bending, flaring, cutting, etc. It's kind of metal forming. And this is stuff that I'm just getting into with the fuel tanks. So I have well, first and foremost, I've got a cutting tool for cutting the aluminum tubing. This is a relatively inexpensive tool. It's not part of the kit. None of these things are part of the kit. It's a relatively inexpensive tool, and it's relatively easy to use, and you can get by with a relatively inexpensive tool to cut the tubing. But it is important that you're doing it with the tube cutter and not just with a pair of snips, because you're going to crimping and crushing it. This will give you a nice clean cut. This does come with a little, this isn't sharp, a little deburring tool that you can put in the end of the tube and kind of get the burr out of there. But talking to Joe, my technical counselor, he said, and he demonstrated, he's like, I just like using the Avery tool, and this actually works really well. Just do a little deburring, chamfer the edge of that aluminum tubing before you flare it, and it works really nicely. Obviously, you need to make sure that you clean those burrs out of there, and so for that, I use compressed air to make sure that I blow it all out. Tube bending tool, which I have not had the opportunity to use yet. But again, this is something that doesn't have to be super expensive. I'll put a link again to all these down in the description below. Okay, this is the famous Rollo Flare tool. It literally just came in today. I will save you all a ton of trouble and say, don't even bother with any of the other flaring tools. You will ultimately end up buying this one, and I did get the other ones. I bought one. This is, I'm not sure the exact model name. I think it's called a POS. It's a total piece of shit. This is just like a heartbreaking paperweight. It's useless. Keep in mind that the flaring that you do on the airplane for the end fittings is 37-degree flaring. Automotive is 45-degree flaring. You can find inexpensive 30-degree flaring tools, but the results are absolute trash. Hold on a second. So then I bit the bullet and I bought a much more expensive flaring tool that I've seen demonstrated by builders or A&Ps, and that's this one right here. And this gave me what is, at least for me, unusable results. And the last video that I did, I kind of showed you that. So that one is a cheap paperweight. This is an expensive paperweight because to me this is unusable. And even when I took this to my technical counselor and I showed him the one that I ended up getting, he's like, yeah, I would never use that. So really disappointing. Those are trash. So just get the Rollo flare. Don't even, look, if you're just starting the empennage kit, it is many, many months. If you have a lot of time to build, you're still maybe 6 months away from needing this. Just put a couple bucks away every week and it won't hurt as bad when you buy it, but you absolutely need to have it. That's part of the metal forming thing. And I'm sure that there's more, by the way, that I just haven't gotten to yet. Oh, wait, there is. There is. I'm gonna have to do a little setup for this next thing, so just hold tight. I'm back. Are you still there? Yep, okay. The RV-7 and the RV-8 for sure, and I'm sure there are other models that do too, but they have folded trailing edges on the elevators and on the ailerons. And this is a bending brake, and this is a variation on the bending brake that's described in, I don't know if it's in chapter, I think it's in chapter 5. They give you an idea of how to build a bending brake out of 2x8s. If it's not chapter 5, then maybe it's in chapter 6 and 7, which is the empennage and wings. But anyways, using 2x8s, the difference between what I did and the way theirs is described is they use the long surfaces for making a clamshell and closing up to form the bend. Again, looking at somebody else's work on somebody's build log or something like that, I saw somebody who did it this way, where instead they're using the narrow portion for the bend, but it gives them a much bigger lever for creating the torque that they need to get that bend. The bends are not easy to make, and it's also very scary. If this is something that you're getting into and you're starting to do the bends and it scares you, then yep, that's how it goes. You're not out of your mind. It's very scary and it does require a lot of force. And the result that you're trying to get to, we'll just talk about this right now. The result that you're trying to get to is that they sit relaxed on those the spars that they are ultimately going to be mated to, because you're going to get it really close where you're like, well, you know, if I squeeze it down, I only have to squeeze it down 3 inches. You really need to try to get it to relax all the way down there. So it is a lot. Anyways, bending brake, metal forming, and this goes in the category of tools you build. Is there anything else in the metal forming? So we did that, we did riveting. I guess, you know, when it comes to other attaching things, I'm just going to move into what I call nice to haves, things that you want to have around that really aren't part of a kit. Attaching, meaning like screws, nuts, washers, etc. Yes, there is something. For the most part, attaching is just your normal toolkit for driving screws or you know, nuts and bolts and whatnot. But you do need a torque wrench, and probably not the one that you already have. You need a torque wrench that is in inch pounds rather than foot pounds, which is probably what you have to check lug nuts on your truck or whatever. So a torque wrench that is in inch pounds. This one is, I want to say that this is 10 to 150 inch pounds. I'm super happy with this tool. But it's something that you absolutely must have. And on that topic with it, you need to make sure that you're getting some torque seal so that you can make sure that anything that has been torqued to its final spec, that you're able to mark it so that you know that that one's been done, and you also know if it starts to move at any point when you go back to inspect it. Kind of on that same topic, you might want to, this will be kind of in the nice to haves, but on the topic of torque wrenches and torque seal, there are hundreds and hundreds of these fittings, these screws and nuts and whatever that you're going to have to torque to a specific value, and you're probably going to leave a bunch of them undone and go back and get them later because they're only in there temporarily. Get some little red tags on string and start tagging everything that isn't done yet, so that when you're at the end, this is, by the way, I'm nowhere near the end, this is just what I've been told. When you're at the end and you're kind of doing your big, what do I have left to do? Those things are really easy to miss. And so Joe, my technical counselor, said just get a whole bag of these tags and tag the hell out of everything so that it jumps out at you in the future. So torque wrench, and then just your regular tools that you probably already have. And if you don't, you can go, I mean, there's always a holiday, so anybody Harbor Freight Lowe's has probably always got like some basic set of wrenches, screwdrivers, and sockets on good sale. So getting into the nice to haves. I'm going to turn the camera over here a little bit. Tape. You need and you'll use a lot of blue masking tape. So just go ahead and get a bunch of it. It works great. It's not too sticky. It's easy to work with. But if you do need something to be really sticky, Gorilla Tape, man, this stuff is monstrous. So I think, oh, I know where I use this. Rolling the leading edges of the rudder in the elevators, and I think that I will also have to do it with the ailerons. Rolling leading edges, a couple layers of Gorilla Tape is going to make your life a lot easier when you're trying to figure out, boy, it's a challenging job, but Gorilla Tape will make it a lot easier. And then on the topic of tape, this is just plain old Scotch tape right here that I have for back riveting. It's not what I started with, but it's what I finished with. I had something that probably most of you don't have, and it was just something randomly that I bought for work last winter, which is not hockey tape, but hockey pad tape. And it's similar to Scotch tape, but it's a bit thicker, and just turned out that for me it was perfect for back riveting, so I used it all up. But really for back riveting, any kind of tape would do. But they do make rivet tape. You can buy it on Spruce or other places. The rivet tape is similar to Scotch tape, except for there's no adhesive down the middle, so there's no adhesive actually touching the rivets. I don't have it. I would say if you're just thinking ahead, it's definitely worth having, because when you do back riveting or flush riveting, in flush riveting, you're putting blue tape over the head of your mushroom set to keep it from slipping. You're going to get little bits of that that's going to want to cling inside the edges of the factory head of the rivet and the dimple right there, and then you're going to be coming through there with like acetone and a toothbrush, cleaning all of that stuff out eventually. So nice to haves, tape. You really kind of need it. Chemicals, because we talked about the Torque seal already. Bow lube is an excellent lubricant. I think a bottle of it is almost $30, but it will last you seemingly forever. Bow, like Boeing, this is their proprietary lube, so they know how to make airplanes. And then if you're using air tools, just simple air tool oil. You put a couple of drops of it right into the fitting before each workday, and you're pretty good to go on that. This is still in the package. Pro Seal. This is important. Pro Seal. Okay, a little interruption for the battery, but where we left off was Pro Seal. This is not the Pro Seal that you're used to talking about when you're talking about building airplanes. This is something that I found in Harbor Freight. The name and the color caught my eye, and I grabbed it because in the empennage kit, the instructions are that when you do those stiffeners for the elevators, that you put a little gumball-sized dab of Pro Seal where those two things meet up at the trailing edge, and then when it cures, it'll kind of reduce vibration and tie them together. This isn't tank sealant. You can't use this on your tanks. You didn't just find a new way to easily dispense Pro Seal on your parts when you're sealing up your tanks. This is still silicone RTV, and if you tried to make your fuel tanks with this stuff, it would leak like a lawn sprinkler. So you can't do it. Not bad to have though. It's inexpensive, and for those other applications, this is just as good as anything else. You don't need to worry about that. So that in the nice to have category. A little whack-a-mole rubber mallet, a big orange dead blow. Those are always good to have around. This this little sort of paint can opener scraping tool, I use this thing all the time. This is so worth having around. If you plan on doing the thing where you sort of, cut out little notches to just remove the blue vinyl from the rivet rows and leave it everywhere else, then the tool to do that is a soldering iron. This is a battery-powered soldering iron. I don't know if I would do it again. I don't like doing that process to begin with, but if you do it, make sure that you dull the tip of this thing. Otherwise, you're just going to put a big gouge in your skin. That's not good. So you need to go to the grinding wheel and dull this thing down a little bit, but at least with a battery-powered one, maybe it doesn't get hot enough or stay hot enough to do that job efficiently, and it just becomes aggravating. And in a high humidity environment like this, you need to remove that vinyl. And I should be removing all this right now. You need to remove that blue vinyl really as soon as possible, because corrosion will start to show along the edges right away. So this is maybe not a nice to have. It's just something that I do have that I could have saved that 18 bucks. I just happen to have these laying around. I've got a whole bunch of them for cleaning guns and stuff, but these are great to have around. These, my friends, these shims are worth their weight in wood. No, these things are so useful all the time. If you go to a big box like Lowe's or Home Depot or whatever, and you go back where they have like windows and doors, you'll probably find big like stacks of these in a single pack for like $5. And this is the key to making everything in your shop level and not wobble, but then also just a million other applications that you can use it for. They're always handy. I often use one of these with this heat gun, cheap heat gun from Harbor Freight. Get it. Everything that you get is going to have this white sticky label on it, and if you have parts, especially in the newer kits where you have a lot of laser cut parts that don't have the blue vinyl on them, those sticky part number labels will be right on it, and they're a pain in the ass to get off. But if you just use a heat gun to warm it up, and then just the little edge of the shim, the sharp edged piece of wood, you can get those up, scrape them right off like nothing, and this isn't going to make a mark on the aluminum. So that's important to have. These guys right here, these are like interior, they're like panel tools for a car or truck, for removing panel hardware and those weird little plastic nuts and whatever, the things that you always break if you have to like get into a panel on your vehicle. Turns out these are super cheap and super great to have in your kit somewhere, because you will find a use for them. And they totally saved my ass. If you go back to sort of like maybe one of the last 2 videos of my horizontal stabilizer, this guy right here saved me, because I did something really stupid, and I buried a rivet under a flange and then riveted the whole thing together. That saved me. Nice to haves. Yes. Okay. You can always use more light. These little guys are like $4 at Harbor Freight, and you can just drop them if you're working inside the skin or wherever. You can just drop it wherever you're working. It's easy. So you can never have enough lights. You can never have enough light. You can never have enough clamps. As many clamps as you can get your hand on. C-clamps, trigger clamps, whatever. Collect them. And then I mentioned earlier, when I was over at the bench tools, but just cut up a whole bunch of these little blocks of wood that can help you clamp things down where the flanges of the clamps are not deep enough to get over it. This will solve your problems. And this has been really helpful to me in really tight spaces, like in the horizontal stabilizer, when you're trying to get 2 like 3 or 4 parts sandwiched together, the interior, front and rear ribs over that spar and doubler. These, just make a bunch of these. Those are very useful. And on that same topic of little pieces of metal that you make, if you follow my channel, you've seen these before. These are a whole bunch of just little coupons, because when you're dealing with nut plates, I found that there are times when you can't hold pieces together. These big, funky, gold-colored, Clecos are too big for those, for the screw hole in those nut plates, and then the brass ones are too small. And so what I do is I just create a bunch of little number 30 holes in little pieces of aluminum, and I can use that on the back side so that the Cleco has something to grab on and hold these things together. So just make a bunch of those guys right there. What else do I have my nice to have to? Oh, cleaning. Before you get to cleaning, these guys, and this is all nasty from Pro Seal, but this little pick set from Harbor Freight that was like 99 cents on sale, I use always, 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 always. This is so helpful in just getting that last little bit of work to get holes lined up, to get rivets or Clecos in there or whatever. So you're going to use this like crazy, and it always just lives with your Clecos. Chemicals, as they like to say. When you're cleaning stuff, acetone is fantastic. It's really quick drying. It's really great at removing oils and grease and whatever you're trying to clean up. But pouring out of this gallon jug is a nightmare. It's a freaking mess. You've seen me on the tanks, and I'll pour it in a glass. What you may not catch when I do it, because it's all time lapse and high speed, but you may not see me stepping outside here, and I probably get as much on the ground as I do in the glass. It does not like to pour. Forever I've been looking for one of these. I just didn't know what to call it. It's an acetone wash bottle. You can't put acetone in plastic because it'll just go soft and probably dissolve it, and you can come back to a puddle of goo the next morning. But I know I've seen these things before, and so finally I saw on another builder's video using this, and he so kindly provided a link to this in the description, which I will do for you as well. But an acetone wash bottle will make lives much easier. So instead of pouring acetone into a glass, I can just have a little squirt wash bottle and blue rags and work it. The other reason that I wanted to talk about cleaning and acetone specifically is MEK substitute. If you watch Scott McDaniel's video on building fuel tanks, he talks about sort of dealer's choice in terms of what you want to use to clean, but they make some recommendations. And one that comes up consistently is MEK or MEK substitute. It dries much more slowly than acetone. And I guess there's some advantages to that. It cleans really well, it dries really slowly, so if you've got it on a rag, you can get a little bit more life out of it before, before it dries up and you have to reapply. It smells like hell. It's so bad, which is why I keep a respirator on my little service cart. It smells so bad, and I don't think that it's actually any more noxious than acetone, but when you smell it, you're convinced you're getting cancer right away. Well, recently visiting some builders at my local airport, they kind of all agree, forget MEK, that stuff sucks. Just use acetone for everything. And that's what I plan to do from here on out, is just use acetone. That's fine. I don't want to use that MEK substitute anymore. Is there anything else that I've forgotten here? If I have forgotten anything, just leave a note down below. I'll be more than happy to address it either with a text response in the thread or on the next video, just do a little stand up and talk about it. But I think I really think that covers the tools that I use consistently and the most. I guess to sum it up, I started with the basic Cleveland kit for the RV-8, and I built on it over time. Disclosing the numbers of those things, you can look up the cost of the Cleveland kit and you can look up the cost of all those other parts, but I'll just go ahead and tell you that as I was making this video, I was sitting down and going through all of the invoices of all the little odds and ends, tools and things like that that I've added to it. The Cleveland basic kit cost around $3,200. And remember that when I bought it, I did it without that drill. This came later. That was like $3,200. And then the stuff that I added afterwards, in terms of tools, I think I'll run it again and I'll post it up here somewhere. But basically I spent about another $2,000 in other tools, all in. So it's a lot. It is, no doubt. But you also may not be starting from zero in terms of tools like I was. But so many of these little odds and ends are so valuable. And I think that, I'll give you an example. I didn't buy this with the kit because I thought I have 2 electric drills and I forget what this was, like $299 or something like that. Do I really want it? And I thought about it after I'd already ordered and received my tools, and I said, you know what, I'm gonna want it sooner or later, and so I got it, and I don't regret it. Had I bought this with my kit, if you buy the kit, there's an 8% discount. So you could say that this could have been, what, like $24 cheaper if I just bought it with the kit originally. So those are things to think about. You're going to spend the money now or you're going to spend the money later, but ultimately your tool kit is going to grow over time. I by no means think that I'm done buying tools. In fact, I know that when I get into doing the electrical, that's going to be a whole other bottle of wax with a whole bunch of new tools, because the only thing that I have in that world right now is just a multimeter, and that's it. So can't build a plane and wire a panel with just a multimeter. So that's going to be a whole other thing, and when we get to it, I'll do a video on that at that time. But yeah, I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up right here. Who knows how long this is going to end up being in the end, but I'll try to do a good job of splitting it up into chapters that are basically navigable and that they make sense. I appreciate you folks tuning in and watching this. I love getting your feedback, so keep that coming. A like and subscribe is always very friendly to get. So other than that, I know that my day was interrupted 3 times today receiving parts, and 2 of those interruptions were really important to getting me moving forward on the fuel tanks, which I'm really excited about, which means that tomorrow we'll get back into the business of finishing the vent lines, closing out the ends of the fuel tanks, and starting to figure out how we want to go about putting on the baffle and closing that up. So anyways, we'll see you tomorrow.